Welcome to the 2021 President's Lecture Series. Please welcome to the stage Ms. Peggy Johnson, CEO of Magic Leap, Dr. Adela de la Torre, President of San Diego State University, and Dr. Eugene Olewski, Dean of the College of Engineering.
Welcome to the 2021 President's Lecture Series. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Let me begin by sharing with you this land acknowledgement. For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego State community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance. We find inspiration from this land, the land of the Kumeyaay. Thank you. So the President's Lecture Series is an important annual event for San Diego State University. And it is designed in the way that we invite distinguished innovators, entrepreneurs, and civic leaders to interact with our students, faculty, staff, and the community. The speakers are invited to share their professional insights, their life experiences, in order to promote a meaningful dialogue that also promotes knowledge, critical thinking, and social interaction. So with this, I would like to tell you that we really tried the best way, our best way to prepare for this event, and researching Ms. Johnson's interview style. We came across an impromptu interview in an elevator, also an interview during a lunch break while driving around in a Microsoft minivan. So therefore, we quickly realized that we need to come up with something more interesting than a simple lecture. So therefore, we are going to have a mind sweep over the Mesa. And in fact, this mind sweep we are going during this conversation to have a closer look at the mind of one of the most powerful female engineers in the world. So we will start with a casual conversation between Ms. Johnson and President de la Torre, and that will be followed by the Q&A session. And then we will conclude with a series of rapid fire questions. So we will learn about Ms. Johnson's view on Magic Leap and also on the development of augmented reality industry, as well as on her career journey as an engineer and also international business leader. So I need to tell you that Ms. Johnson has been published and named by many publications and organizations. And some of this you can see on the screen. Those include being named as one of the most powerful female engineers in the world, and also listed as one of the top 100 women leaders in STEM. She earned her bachelor degree in electrical engineering from San Diego State University, and she has held leadership roles at Microsoft, Qualcomm, and General Electric. So this all promises a very dynamic conversation between two female leaders who are trailblazers in their own right. So let's get this mind sweep on the Mesa started. President de la Torre, would you like to begin?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to introduce Peggy Johnson and have this great conversation. So I'm going to start off with a question that will touch a little bit of your history as a child. It's really extraordinary because when I think about you as this amazing electrical engineer and then a business leader, and then I think about your own background, I think a lot of people want to hear the narrative. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you today is, a young girl, you wanted to be a nun. And I need to tell you, Peggy, I also wanted to be a nun when I was in 7th grade, so I can relate to this. But tell us about that and what made you change your mind?
I can't believe you found that in my background, but yes, I did want to be a nun. We went to Catholic school. We had a big Catholic family, Irish Catholic family, and the Catholic school was right across the street from our house. And those nuns ruled, and I thought, I would love to have that kind of power someday. And that was when they still had, I'm aging myself, they still had the habits, the long habits, and I thought it'd be fun to wear that. And anyway, I was enamored with them. I thought, this is what I want to be. And in 1st grade, I started at the Catholic school and had my sights on being a nun until 2nd grade, when I met Johnny Lucetta in 2nd grade. And I decided not to be a nun after that because I wanted to marry Johnny Lucetta. So can't do both.
So it's interesting because I had a nun that influenced me as well. It was Sister Helen Clare in 7th grade. But after having that end of 7th grade experience, I had the same kind of awakening. I said, this is a tough life. Admired her, but I needed to move on.
Yeah.
So moving on, I'd like to follow up. You had an incredibly large family. You were one of 15 children. And I want to know how that really shaped your person as an individual, but also as a leader, the leader that you are today. So could you just reflect on that a bit as well?
Yeah, like how did that happen? 15 kids. So there's a story there. My mom and dad had 8 children, and when I was the second youngest, and I wasn't quite 3 yet, and my father passed away. And we were part of that, that big Catholic church across the street, and there was a family there who had 7 kids, and my stepfather eventually, his wife had passed away. And so they had a lot in common, 7 and 8 kids. And somebody had the bright idea to set them up because they knew they had a lot in common. And they set them up. I remember it was a luau they had at the church. They went over, sat them next to each other, and within a year they were married, and 15 kids moved into a house. And not a very big house, if I recall. It was like there was a boys' room. All the boys went into one room, and there was bunk beds all over the place. The girls got a couple rooms, and then my parents had a room, and only 3 bathrooms. And one was my parents only. Oh, no. So it was a girl's bathroom and a boy's bathroom. But it shaped me because it's a lot of talking. We had dinner, by the way, every night at 6:30, and you did not miss it, and you had to be home at 6:30. It was a family rule. And but being the second youngest, I was also the second youngest of the blended family. I would sit there. I did not have a place of prominence. Like I was on the kid table till I was about 21. But I would listen because I could never get a word in edgewise. And I'm fairly quiet anyway. I'm pretty much an introvert, but I listened all the time. And that, I think, had a big part in shaping even how I am today in a business meeting. I'm a listener. I'm watching. I'm taking cues from people. And it's been helpful in throughout my career to be a listener and a learner, which is what I was as number 14 out of 15 kids. I was learning from everybody above me. And it had a big effect on even how I do business today.
So that's fabulous, because I do think listening is key to leadership. So I think the family experience was pretty remarkable. So now I want to switch gears and talk about San Diego State and your experience here in engineering. I want you to just reflect back to when you started at San Diego State. What kind of got you engaged into engineering? What was the experience, and could you tell us a little bit about what encounter was critical in making that decision to leap into a discipline where there were few women?
Right. So, I mean, even just going back to grade school and being taught by those nuns and high school, I loved math and science. In fact, going back to a very, early age, I always loved those disciplines. And I remember when I got to my senior year, and I had to go to the guidance counselor and talk about what you wanted to study in college, and they were going to give you some guidance. And she said, well, what do you like? And I said, I love math and I love science. And she goes, how about business? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, I just had but neither of my parents had gone to college, so I didn't have a lot of input. And I just agreed with the guidance counselor and said, okay, I guess that's what I'll do. And so I came here to San Diego State, and I was a business major, and I had a job on campus in educational technology and librarianship, because I was telling the folks earlier today, I met one of the professors from educational technology, but they don't have the librarianship part anymore. But that's what my job was, and I had to go deliver mail to the engineering department. And it's the old building that was next door to the new building, and I was, kind of lost in the building, and there was a long hallway down to the department head office, and I'm walking down there, and there was 2 administrative assistants who heard me coming, and they could tell it was a woman walking down the hallway. And when I came in, they're like, are you here to talk about engineering? And I said, no, I'm here to deliver the mail. Here you go. And they said, do you know anything about engineering? We never get women down this hallway. We thought maybe you wanted to learn about engineering. And I said, I actually know absolutely nothing about engineering, because no one had ever suggested it as a career to me. Like, literally not one person. I went to a big high school in Los Angeles, like 4,000 kids, and it was the curriculum there was strong, and yet nobody mentioned that to me. Not my guidance counselor, no teachers or anything. And I had a vague idea of what an engineer was. My dad had a couple friends who were engineers, but I didn't see myself in that job. It didn't interest me. They worked in an area that just didn't interest me. And anyways, these 2 ladies sat me down, and they said, well, let us tell you about what an engineering degree can do for you. And they talked me into it. They said, the world will be your oyster. I remember that line, it reverberated. And they said, with an engineering degree, you can do anything. You can circle back into business. You could come up with solutions in the medical field. You could work in the academic field. There's so many things you could do. And they just made it come to life for me, like no one ever had. They took the time to tell me what it was, and they made it come to life. And then they sort of slid the papers across the desk to change my major. I just took them home that night, and I remember I called my mom, and my mom said, that's a great idea. Yeah, you should do that. And so I changed my major the next day and became a double E major.
So what's interesting is you had really specific encounters. Some of them were not necessarily direct, but they had an impact on you, a tremendous impact. Were there other experiences that you can reflect on that were really pivotal in influencing your pathway in engineering here at San Diego State?
Yeah, so remember back then, many years ago, there weren't very many other women in my classes. And I do remember several professors making me feel included, making me feel welcome, and that kept me, because it was hard. There's no saying it differently. Engineering's a tough field to pursue. And I walk into the classroom and nobody looks like me, and I was intimidated. I didn't know if this was really the field for me, and those professors really helped out a lot. If I needed a little more help in an area, they spent time with me, and it just made me feel like it was okay for me to be there. And I think that is pivotal for a lot of women, even today, that they have those around them make them feel included in the classroom, and those teachers did, and thankfully they kept me in the program. I got out the other end, but I don't know if I could have done it without the confidence and the encouragement that so many of them gave me.
So now let's fast forward today, and we have a lot of students in the audience. What would be your words of wisdom? I mean, you've touched on the impact of faculty, individual advisors encouraging you, but what would be the words that you would want to share with students, particularly young women who want to pursue careers in engineering?
You know, so I look back and I think what might have caught my attention about engineering earlier, before that chance encounter with those two administrative assistants. And it was what I could do with the degree. And that's something that I don't think, particularly with young women, we don't necessarily draw the line all the way out to the end. You know, you could build a new medical device. You know, you could be part of a team that create solutions for climate change. There's like something that is meaningful and personal to you. This degree can help you obtain. But I didn't see it that way. I didn't think it was for me until those two women said, it is for you. You can do so many things. And I think it's really about understanding the power of this degree. And I've taken it in so many new areas. Obviously, I still have the degree. I still think of myself as an engineer. But all of the training, all of the cognitive abilities, the problem solving that I learned with an engineering degree has been applied in all facets of my career, from when I was first an engineer to when I became a manager and I moved over into different areas of the company. I relied on what I learned with that degree, and I still rely on it today. So it's something that is very much enduring, whether you're actually a practicing engineer or you're using elements of what you learned from the degree in other areas. So I think it's about really seeing the opportunity with an engineering degree, which can be much more than I think what some women might envision is an engineering degree.
You know, it's interesting that you said that, because my degree is in economics, and oftentimes people will say, well, do you use your degree? I use it every single day.
Right.
And it's part of your own being, becomes part of your how you look at the world, how you make decisions. So I think that's a real good observation for a lot of individuals. They sometimes think of the degree in terms of very technical dimensions.
Right.
But it really has a broader impact in terms of how you look at your life.
Exactly.
Now, moving on, I wanted to talk about your own career. You've shattered a number of glass ceilings. We've seen all the recognition here. And one of the things that I think a lot of our students might be interested in, how do we, for those who are interested in getting into the tech industry, they want to find a pathway that will really make them effective in this industry. What would be your suggestions? And we have a lot of engineering students here also listening.
You know, for me, I think internships are so helpful. They helped me a lot when I was here, just to understand what resonates with me, because sometimes it's hard to know when you're just, you know, studying and working toward your engineering degree. How do I want to apply this degree? What do I want to pursue? What am I passionate about? And so I think the opportunity, and I had several opportunities from San Diego State to intern at various companies around town, and those to help me decipher a little bit about how I wanted to apply my degree. And in fact, one thing that I found is, although I had a double E degree, I really liked computers, and that was still kind of early days of computers. And that was something that, you know, my first job, I was able to apply the computer science that I learned from the double E department to my first job, and I said, I really like this. This is something that I want to continue to pursue. And so that was the path that I took. But I don't know that I would have found that out if I hadn't had the opportunity with a number of internships, just to try things out. Then you kind of figure out, oh, I like this, that doesn't really resonate with me. It kind of helps guide you into what companies you might want to pursue.
So I read that you, through your career, figured out that you can't be someone who you don't want to be, that it's really critical to stop trying to do that. And so can you walk us through this idea? Because a lot of times when we start out, oftentimes we know our parents have passions for us. We may even have passions early on in our career, and then we get the degree and we think this is where we need to go. But you early on figured out, you know, I can't be somebody that I'm not.
Yeah, and I had an idea of kind of what an engineer was because I had examples all around me. And at the time, they were largely just men. And so when I went out into my first jobs, most of the time I was the only woman in the room, and I'm trying to learn from them. And as I said, I am an introvert, and I'm just naturally a bit quiet. And I would be in a room with a lot of boisterous voices, and I found it really hard to make my voice heard in a room like that. And so I would try to be like that. I thought, well, I need to do that. I need to. In fact, that was the feedback I got oftentimes from my manager. They would say, hey, your work product's okay, but we never hear from you. Like, what are you thinking? What's your opinion? And I thought, well, you do when like it's one-on-one, or I'll drop by people's offices. Like, I had a form of communicating. It just wasn't in a big meeting because I couldn't ever get the floor, and so I would come into those big meetings and I would kind of get drowned out. I didn't have the opportunity. But when I tried to be what I saw in the room, which I thought I needed to be successful in this engineering world, I was a miserable failure at it. I would, a couple times I would like slam my hand on the table and try and, raise my voice, and people would say, well, what's wrong with you? Because I wasn't being myself. And I thought, okay, well, that's not working. And I even contemplated leaving the field of engineering at one point because I felt like I wasn't able to be successful because what the company wanted me to be was not who I was. And I talked it over with my manager. I was at Qualcomm at the time, and I remember he said, well, why are you thinking of leaving? And I said, because I just don't fit in here. And it was so great. I mean, this is before all of the sort of the inclusive training that we get in companies now. And he realized that I needed a little help making my voice heard in those big meetings. And he would make room for me. We'd go into a meeting and he'd go around the table and say, Peggy, what do you think? And he would throw me the ball, and I would like, great, I can finally speak. I had the little opening in there and I could get my point across. And that really changed everything for me because I realized first I didn't have to try and be somebody I wasn't, because I wasn't very good at that. And once I was just myself, I felt like that was the point when my career really took off. I felt like once you don't have to spend all those cycles being somebody you're not, and you can just be yourself, things really changed for me. And then that's when I started to move up at Qualcomm at the time.
So it's important to follow your passion and be who you are.
Absolutely.
Very critical. Now I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about Magic Leap, because I know a lot of people here want to hear about that journey and the technology behind it. So can you give us a little bit of an overview of the journey, about the technology, and also about how you worked with some of the most iconic American tech companies?
Yeah, so the journey does go back to Qualcomm. I spent a few years at General Electric, and then basically they were going to move me to Syracuse, New York, and I knew I couldn't drive in the snow. Like, I had all these silly reasons why I couldn't go. And so I started looking for a job and found the job at Qualcomm. That was actually when I think it was Eric, my husband, who said, this company, Qualcomm, that's spun out of Linkabit, you might want to go check them out. They're hiring, because our other option was pick up and move to Syracuse, New York. So I get to Qualcomm and spent many years first in engineering and then through various aspects of management. I was in sales and marketing. I touched, I think, every part of Qualcomm. But at some point, the opportunity was the thing I guess I found myself most passionate about at Qualcomm was the emerging technologies, because we were making the chip that was going into just about every cell phone in the world, and we were always putting more and more tech into the chip. And so I liked all that cutting edge work that they were doing. And by that time I'd moved on to the business side, so I was licensing these technologies. Every now and then we'd buy a company and pull it in. And one of the technologies that we started working on was augmented reality, very early on at Qualcomm. And you know, the idea then was, what you can do on a mobile phone is you hold your phone up and you're looking through your camera and you can still see your physical world, but then we would augment digital content onto it. And it was interesting. We didn't quite know what to do with the technology, but we thought it was really cool, and we thought that we should integrate this into the chip. And so Qualcomm built a platform called Vuforia, which actually was bought by PTC, a company in the industrial engineering space. And but we had it there for quite some time, and it just caught my interest. I thought, there's a lot of interesting things you could do with this by seeing your physical world, but putting bits of digital content in front of your eyes, and your eyes perceiving the content to be on that chair over there, or back against that door in the back of the room. I thought, that's fascinating. And then fast forward a little bit, I ended up, after 25 years at Qualcomm, going to Microsoft, and Microsoft had HoloLens, an augmented reality platform, which was a headset-worn device, so your hands are free to gesture, and there was different input modalities, but HoloLens really excelled with gesture technologies. So here again, you're looking at your physical world, and you can touch things, you could bring in digital content by swiping, and I was fascinated by that, and I thought, there's just so many things, both consumer and enterprise applications of what we can do with that. I mean, obviously gaming's one, but there's all sorts of business related ones. It can be a real tool for business. And it was around, I think it was around 2018 or so, I was at a conference with my boss, Satya Nadella from Microsoft, and we ran into Roni Abovitz, who had started Magic Leap. And he wanted to meet with us just so that, since we're both in the AR space, we might work together on some of the industry protocols and how do you handle content and things like that. So we took the meeting, and then he invited us to come down and see their product, Magic Leap 1, in South Florida, where they were based. And I remember it didn't work on Satya's schedule until many months later, but I was able to come within a few weeks. And I was down there in South Florida, and they put the Magic Leap 1 device on my headset, and I was just blown away. I thought, this is it. You know, there was content. It was amazing. You know, I think you've maybe seen the whale coming out of the gym floor. They have content that just caught my attention. And I was fascinated by it. And I thought, you know, if there's ever an opportunity to work in this field, I'm gonna pursue it. So then fast forward a few more years at Microsoft, and I had the ambition at some point to be a CEO. And lo and behold, I'm literally reading, you know, one of the tech journals, or the tech news, daily news, and I see that Roni was stepping down as CEO, and there was a CEO search for Magic Leap. And I very intentionally raised my hand. It was during the pandemic, which is probably a crazy time to make a big change like that, but I said, I want to pursue this, and that's how I found myself at Magic Leap. And that was I've been there about a year now.
Well, that's an amazing journey. I want to step back to the Qualcomm, because you were there for 25 years,
Yeah.
Is that correct? But in the material that we read, you indicated that one of the hardest interviews you went through was at Qualcomm.
Yes.
and so we were just interested in knowing, you know, what made it difficult? What were the issues that surfaced that has this deeply ingrained in your past?
It's still seared in my memory, yeah. I mean, anybody who interviewed at Qualcomm back in those days were told, you know, they have the toughest interviews, you're going to be there all day long, it's going to be one after another, you're going to be exhausted. And then there's the CTO Franklin Antonio, and he is going to ask you the toughest questions of all. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to, I'm never going to do this. I was intimidated again. You know, I thought this is going to be I almost thought about canceling the interview. I just thought, I'm not going to pass. I'm not going to pass. That was what was in my head. So I go and I thought, I got to have a strategy. When if Franklin's on my schedule, and I get there in the morning, I look at my schedule, and he's like 4 o'clock. Oh no, I've got Franklin Antonio. And my strategy was to walk in the door and just keep talking. I thought, I'm not going to let him get a word in edgewise. He's not going to ask me a question I can't answer, because he's not going to be able to ask me a question. So, and that's exactly what happened. And he wanted to know about my GE experience, and the job was in anti-submarine warfare for surface ships. And at the time, there was this book out called The Hunt for Red October, and they eventually made a movie about it. And so he was kind of fascinated with submarine warfare and things. And I just launched onto submarine warfare and what I was doing in that, hopefully I didn't, let out any secrets, because I did have a clearance at the time, but I went off into that. And he didn't get a word in edgewise. He wasn't able to ask me any questions. And I remember at about 4:25, his assistant knocking on the door and saying, Franklin, you got to get to another meeting. I'm like, oh, thank goodness, I didn't get a question from him.
Oh my gosh.
So the strategy worked, but it was a tough day. And I think Qualcomm still has a pretty tough interviewing process.
And if you compare that strategy to what you did with Magic Leap, was there any other concerns or differences that occurred when you interviewed for Magic Leap?
Well, the concern was it was all virtual. I had to meet all of the board members virtually. I had to meet my management team virtually. That was a little concerning, because, being in front of somebody is so much more comfortable than looking at somebody through a Zoom screen, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get my points across. If I couldn't. It's hard to read people on the other side to see are they hearing me? Are they listening to me? All those things that you do in a conversation are a little bit harder to do on a Zoom call. But I got through the other side of it, and actually started the job virtually, and didn't meet my management team until I started in August. I didn't meet most of them until about November, when I went back to Florida for the first time, because we couldn't travel at the time.
Wow, that's amazing. We're going to have an opportunity right now to turn to a sizzle reel on spatial computing for enterprise. Wow, what a fantastic video. So now let's focus a little bit on Magic Leap. I know that you have done some amazing things, and one of the things that really struck me was the miraculous surgery you did at UC Davis that successfully separated conjoined twins. What was it like for you as a CEO really to do something that really transformed and saved the life of these two young children? And what was important in terms of this surgery, I mean, for the company and its place, if you will, in this global arena?
Right, so we had launched the company as a consumer-focused device. And that was probably a bit ambitious because at the time there was very little content and the device was a bit expensive for a consumer to buy. It was, I think it was initially priced around $2,700, about $3,000, which is a lot for a consumer device. And so we had made the pivot to enterprise because we felt like there were near-term use cases in the business world, and eventually it will come back to the consumer world when there can be more silicon integration and just miniaturization of different parts of the optics. But what we found so gratifying with this particular one was we were working with a company called Brain Lab, and they had been in the business of making 3D models of brains, which could then be viewed on iPads and PCs and things like that. So the company had started working with them to put that same software onto Magic Leap. So they would have the 3D model, you'd put the device on, and there would be the brain, and it could be as big as small as you want. You could open it up, you could walk inside of it, you could see a slice of it. And they started working with a number of hospitals and universities and institutions on the introduction of using this as a training tool for the medical space. And they'd been doing that for a year or so on Magic Leap 1. And to me, that just really showed the opportunity that, wow, this can be a real enterprise tool. And in this case, Brain Lab was contacted by UC Davis, who were faced with these conjoined twins. They were conjoined at the brain, and that's a very delicate operation. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to train the team, the surgeons and the nurses and the others. There was about 30 people that were involved in just the operation in preparation for the separation of the twins. And they trained them all on Magic Leap devices and using the Brain Lab 3D visualization software. And what they were able to do is to go over and over and over the surgery and see it from different angles, because those 30 people were going to see the surgery from different angles and what it would look like from their angle. They had an orange team and a purple team, and the orange was assigned to one baby and the purple to the other baby. And when the separation happened, all the things that had to happen post-incision. And it was fascinating. This was all during COVID as well, how they were able to use it as not only a training tool for the 30 people, but also to map out the surgical pathways that the doctors and the surgeons would take. And they debated it, and they talked about different ways that they would make the incisions, and they came away from it saying, this is not only a great training tool, but an educational tool. So that whole thing can then be filmed, mm-hmm. and it can be used over and over again in medical classrooms. They can watch the whole surgery from these different angles. But the other thing that it was able to do is show the parents what was going to happen mm-hmm. to their children, which is a whole nother facet of it. So it was useful in a number of ways, and just the training aspect, I think, is the thing that resonated so much with those surgeons, and they're still using it now. Now they're starting to look at spinal surgeries and things like that, where you can do the pre-surgical planning, mm-hmm. and then eventually what we want to do with Magic Leap 2 is have the surgeon wear it during the operation, and we can put digital markers on whatever wow. they're operating on. So right now we're working with companies operating on knees. And during the surgery, you can see, the line where the incision needs to be. You can have as many screens as you want. Usually in an operating room, there's one or maybe two screens. You can hang up as many as you want around the operating room because they're all virtual. You can maybe get so far into the operation and see something you don't understand, and you can call in an expert. Mm-hmm. The expert can see what you're seeing right in situ while they are operating, and talk you through something that might be confusing. And So you can think about cases of telehealth in areas, rural areas or in emerging markets where there's not a plethora of brain surgeons or spinal surgeons or heart surgeons. They can now have distance telehealth and actually be there with the doctor and seeing what they're seeing, and annotate from afar too, and say, circle things on the live knee with a digital pen. So I think we'll look back someday and say, do you remember when surgery was done without augmentation, and it was just the surgeon taking out their knife, and now you can put a digital marker down and have the surgeon follow that to the sub-millimeter level. So it's very, very, very precise surgery.
That's amazing. It's going to transform the world. And now looking forward, what is your vision for Magic Leap, and what impact do you think it will have on the world? I mean, this one story, I can see multiple impacts, but I'm sure there's even a greater vision.
I do think we're just starting to uncover all the areas that augmenting your physical space with digital content can do. One thing I'm excited about is the idea of putting headsets into and onto the eyes of frontline workers. A lot of our frontline workers, so people who work in manufacturing facilities, people, receptionists who greet you when you come in, many times frontline workers don't have access to the same digital tools that the rest of us do. Mm-hmm. They might even share a PC, or maybe not even don't even have a PC on their desk, or don't have a desk to go back to because they're mobile oftentimes. I think it's really going to change their abilities and augment their abilities to do their jobs better. Mm-hmm. So going back to in a manufacturing facility, you might have someone who comes in and every day they have a certain number of processes they need to check and monitor, and machines they need to look at to make sure that factory stays running. Now with augmented reality, you can put a headset on, they're hands-free, they still see the factory, but they walk up to a machine and they can see, there's been an error through the night. Mm-hmm. I've got to do something to make a repair here. This kind of problem doesn't happen very often. I forget how to make this repair. They can call up right there in the upper corner of the screen a YouTube video on how the repair is done. If they open the machine up and they can't figure out, what they're supposed to turn first, they can call in the expert. So these same sort of features that I talked about for the surgeon are applicable to just about any frontline worker who is mobile, needs to still use their hands to do their job, but now they have essentially a PC on their eyes. They have their same physical world in front of them, but they're able to augment it with useful digital content. And that's very empowering. We've really heard that from workers who've used it, where you don't have to rely on maybe going back to a training room somewhere or opening a book and leafing through things, because it's all right there in front of you. And it actually brings our frontline workers into the digital world. So I'm excited about that aspect of it, because I think it'll have a significant impact on some of our most critical workers in the world.
It kind of reminds me of when Toyota was in the forefront of industrial organization and our workers were really engaged in product development. Mm-hmm. I can see this as really empowering workers in controlling the information so that they can really become more participatory in the process.
Exactly.
And engagement, and really can transform work in a way in which they're equally involved and create the kind of pathways and even recommendations to their supervisors. So I can see it as really creating a greater democracy, or a more democratic
It is a
workplace.
Democratization of work, and they get to own their work, and they're empowered by it, and they have a tool now that lets them do that. So I think there'll be some significant impact in that field.
That's fabulous. Well, I want to just turn back to, and I think we have time for one more question, in regards to, again, looking to thrive in the tech sector as a woman. It's a fairly iconic industry. These are companies that oftentimes you don't have women in these leadership roles. So what advice would you give to young women who would like to emulate your pathway to rise to the top? How did you negotiate? So there are things like negotiation. Oftentimes there isn't somebody to mentor you and to help you negotiate in terms of even not only the job, but also the salary and also having the voice heard. So what words would you share with our young women who are aspiring to become like you?
You know, something that helped me quite a bit through my career at GE, at Qualcomm, and at Microsoft is I would find just sort of, it was informal. It wasn't like a formal mentorship program. It was just an informal mentoring, and I would just gather a group of friends and talk about those things. I remember back at Qualcomm when I wanted to I thought about making the move from engineering to the business side. I wasn't sure, you know, should I really do that? Am I going to leave engineering for good if I go over to the business side? And kind of debating that in my head. And I gathered a group of folks just to bounce the ideas off of. And it wasn't anything formal at all. It's just, I always call it kind of accidental mentorship, where you just kind of get to voice what your concerns are about making such a move, but it also gives you some confidence to make the move, to have that kind of feedback. And I use that throughout my time at all those companies. In fact, at Qualcomm, we called it Sweet Fest. My husband Eric knows this because I would host it at our house often. A different person hosted it, and we would all get together and we had to bring something sweet to eat. And the reason we called it Sweet Fest is because there was a group of guys at Qualcomm who used to get together and didn't ask the women, and they called it Meat Fest, and they would barbecue only meat. And they thought that was like, you know, it was like when their wives would go out of town, they'd go, let's get together and have Meat Fest. But it was a way that they all got to, you know, talk about their careers, and it was an opportunity for them in an informal setting, because they were all Qualcomm employees, to kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And we didn't have the same thing, so we decided we're going to have Sweet Fest. That was our response to the Meat Fest at Qualcomm, and it worked well. I mean, I still talk to those ladies. I just talked to one yesterday. So it's a very enduring group, and but I think you sometimes can get caught up in formal mentorship programs, which are good. But I found the accidental the informal mentoring is maybe even more useful. You can be a little more open.
I think that's an interesting observation, because I do think accidental mentorship, can be very powerful, because you never know where you're going to learn something about yourself from somebody who may not be embedded with you in a long-term kind of mentorship relationship, but will spark an interest that can really transform your choice or your decision in ways that you could never imagine.
Well, like those two administrative assistants, they were accidental mentors.
That's a great example. So it's something I think we all should keep in mind.
Yeah.
Well, I do have time for, I think, one more question, and it's about, I want you to really think about the future, beyond. Where are we going to go? If you think about, you know, what we've done with mobile phones, the cloud, new spatial computing. So what's the next big thing? I mean, AI clearly is, but are there other things out there that you could see 10 to 15 years from now that we really need to be, give some thought to, reflection about the future?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to be done in spatial computing, because we're still very nascent in this field. There's use cases now, and there's application of it now, but I think that can go off in many, many different directions. At some point we'll have the ability, whether it's glasses or maybe eventually even contacts, to augment our physical world and rely on it. And I think we'll look back and say, remember when things weren't augmented? Or, we just saw the physical world. And so I think there's a lot more of a pathway still to go ahead for spatial computing. But I think something that, if you're looking out a few more years, I think quantum computing is probably another exciting area coming up. We used to work in quantum computing quite a bit at Microsoft, and it always fascinated me that, what we'll be able to do with a quantum computer someday will, just make traditional computers look like a thing of the past. It'll be amazing to have the compute power of quantum computing to solve some of the world's biggest problems, where we just don't have enough compute power right now to apply to that yet. So I think that's a little further out, but I think it's something that's coming eventually.
Well, I want to thank you. I think we're now at a minute. I want to now that we have these ideas about spatial computing and quantum computing, I want to bring Eugene back to the podium, and we are going to start questions from the audience and then our rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, President de la Torre. That was indeed a very interesting conversation. Now the questions from the audience. There are 2 microphones located in each of the aisles, and please line up behind the microphone. I will call you individually. Please begin by introducing yourself and then asking your question. We have 15 minutes for question and answers, and we will take as many questions for Mrs. Johnson as time allows. Let's begin with you.
Hi, my name is Satish Sharma. I'm a professor in electrical and computer department. My question is that how you think this augmented technology will help teaching research, because lots of information now you can ask, and then right now you can get processed, right? Answers for you. How this is going to happen, or how you see that?
So the question is about how I think it can assist research and teaching. Yeah, so it's interesting. I just saw some fascinating applications of that walking through the engineering department, which some of the students here on campus have done with augmented reality. And just the last one was just the idea of the visualization in the mechanical engineering of atoms. And I always struggled with that when I took my ME classes here, because I just didn't have that kind of brain that could visualize something. I would be looking at the 2D picture of the atomic structures and just couldn't see what that really meant in a 3D version. And I think that will be very impactful for students like me who have a hard time, translating from a 2D piece of paper to what that actually looks like, because they were creating structures. You can spin them around, you could see them from different directions. It's as if it exists right here in front of you. So I think that's just one area, 3D visualization, which I think will be very impactful for a lot of folks who struggle with, sort of a 2D version of something. It'll really bring a new tool to the educational arena.
Certainly those abstract in nature.
Yes, anything abstract can be made much easier to understand when you can have it right in front of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anna Marino. I graduated in 2017 and now work as a systems engineer at JPL.
Oh, wonderful.
So early in my career, I feel like I was extremely motivated and working a bunch, and now I feel like I'm getting close to that burnout period and overwhelmed. So my question for you is, what advice do you have, because I'm sure you've worked many long hours, to stay motivated and not get burnt out?
That's so easy to do, particularly early in your career. And oftentimes I think, companies think, well, that person, they're new, they're just out of college, they don't have kids yet, they can work long hours. Well, don't let them do that to you because you're such a more productive person when you make time for other things in your life. And if you're just working all the time and cutting into your downtime where you need to re-energize, you're not really doing anyone any good. And years ago somebody told me you should think of your life as glass balls that you're juggling, and you're juggling all these things, and one is your work, and one is your family, one is your health. So all of these things that are important, you can't do all of them well all of the time. And so if you have the feeling that I'm just not doing well right now in one of those, it's okay to set the glass ball down. You don't want to drop it. So you really do need to take the opportunity to spend time with all of those things. Sometimes it's more important for you to be out watching your kids play soccer in the middle of the day than it is to be at work, and vice versa. Sometimes you've got a deadline and you've got to get something out, and it might mean that you're a little late getting home, but you can't do them all the time. And I feel like early in my career, I was guilty of that. I tried to do it all the time, and I got to the same point. And that just doesn't serve anybody any good, doesn't serve you any good, doesn't serve the company any good. So I would definitely hold the line on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, President De La Torre and Ms. Johnson and Dean Olewski. I'm Karen May Newman. I'm a professor in mechanical engineering, although I'm not asking a super technical question. One of the few experiences most of us had with augmented reality took place a couple of years ago with Pokemon Go.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me what lessons the industry learned from that wide exposure of augmented reality to consumers about what the gaps are between what will be successful and where they are with that application?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Pokemon Go, you know, remember the days where like people were walking around like zombies and they were like chasing something. I think we learned that that could be a little dangerous because they were tripping a lot, which happens in both VR and then in things like that when you're holding something up. So one of the things that we learned was that a head-mounted device is much safer, and you have the use of your hands. And you know, you have better vision overall. And so while that was a fun game, it was never going to translate to a business tool. And so that was something that played into our vision of you know what that can mean. Another thing is there's a fair amount of people who actually get a little, it's almost like a little airsick or seasick with both augmented reality and virtual reality. And so we've spent a lot of time studying that and how close you can really get the digital content to you so it doesn't make you dizzy and make you lose your frame of reference. And some of that we learned from Pokemon Go. And just that, you know, you can't ignore that sort of thing. There's not a lot of studies on it, but it's somewhere in the range of 10 to 20% of people, and oddly women a little bit more than men, have that feeling when they're using those devices. And so we wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. It needs to be a device for everybody. So we spent a lot of time studying that as well. So those are a couple things we learned from Pokemon Go.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Josiah. I'm a senior in civil engineering, and I was inspired by the video on the Magic Leap and how the virtual reality plays a role in the Magic Leap. So how is that like engineered into the, like how is that virtual reality even engineered?
Hi, well, it was tough. You know, Magic Leap has been at it for 10 years now. And the hardest thing, so there are differences between virtual reality, which is something like what Oculus is, and then augmented reality, which is what Magic Leap makes. So with virtual reality, you're fully occluded and you're inside another world, and you do have the opportunity to trip on things if you don't move it out of the way. But augmented reality, you still see your virtual world, and we're placing digital content very accurately and precisely in your digital world, and it's persistent. So if I put a virtual glass right here and I walk away and I come back, that virtual glass has to still stay there because that's what augmented reality is. And the optics to do that are very, very, very challenging. And you can see it because a lot of the companies that are working on VR are starting to work on AR, and like Mark Zuckerberg had a line the other day saying, it's hard. Augmented reality is hard. And who knows that best but Magic Leap, because we've been doing it for 10 years, but we've got it figured out now. But the optics can be very, very challenging, and the engineers that developed it are amazing, the optics engineers that we have. And they had to go down and try out a lot of things. You know, it's a new field, no one had ever done anything like this before. And they learned a lot in those 10 years. And so we've got Magic Leap 1, which you've seen today on CNBC. We announced Magic Leap 2, which is coming out, and the optics are improved even more. The text legibility, the color uniformity, the image quality are all at yet another level, because we're now on the next generation, and we're able to take what we learned from Magic Leap 1 and build that into Magic Leap 2, but it's all about the optics. That's the heart and soul of augmented reality, and it is challenging. But it's the engineers who did it. They've done a great job, and hope everyone gets a chance to test out Magic Leap 2 when it comes out soon.
So like, let's say for example, like I remember I was playing this virtual reality game where it's a 360 virtual reality, and all these plates will just the object of the game is you have all these plates and then you use ninja stars to break them, and the plates could just pop up anywhere. And the fact that like wherever direction you go, every plate you see will stay there until you break them. Is that a good example of augmented reality?
Yes, though think of it as you're actually seeing it in your physical world, where virtual is usually you're fully occluded. You're in some other world, and it's almost like being in a cinema. But this, in the physical world, in a game like that, yes, it would be here, it would be stuck there, and you would walk to the other side of this hall, and you'd look back here, and it would still be right here. It's as if it's a physical thing sitting in your physical world, but it's all digital. So that's the tough part.
Wow, props to those engineers.
Yeah, it's true.
All right, thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Shweta Sarkar. I'm a professor in the Electrical and Computer Engineering department. So thank you for the amazing talk. It was very inspirational and motivational. We at the College of Engineering we recently won an award from NSF to build an engineering research center, and the mission and vision of the center would be to connect the unconnected. So bring connectivity to rural America, and just the way you talked about, remote healthcare, robotic surgery, to people who do not have access to those facilities. I was wondering if, just curious to know what your thoughts would be on using augmented reality, or how augmented reality can play a part in this domain of rural America and people who are not connected.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can play a big role. And even things like travel, where it might be hard for some people to travel and see something. You can actually bring that thing to rural America. You could bring the Taj Mahal and set it down in front of somebody, and it could be this big, and then you could blow it up and walk into it. And there's just so many things that you can do that will help, I think, both rural areas as well as emerging markets that they just don't have access to. So you can think of it as a tool that brings access to people who normally wouldn't. And that access might be a neurosurgeon, or it might be being able to see the Taj Mahal. It could be a number of things that just because of the physical distance of wherever they are, or the realities of an area that they live in, they don't have the access. So we're really excited about that aspect of augmented reality.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Peggy. My name is Craig Stevens. Business finance, 1982, so I'm just a couple years older than you.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm fascinated. I need a few hours with you, okay? So I'm going to swap cards with you. And here's why. We both went through, my internship led to a career in corporate America for 21 years. And I arranged to get blown out of a company that was going global, because I didn't want to be there anymore, because I always saw myself as an entrepreneur. So 2 questions for you, and a suggestion and a request. The first one is, I always had a mentor. They don't appear necessarily. I had to hunt them down and make them my mentors. So I'm using you as a tool. One thing I found since I sold my first company was, I do a lot of teaching and lecturing up here, is every kid at this campus needs somebody like you and me and everybody else. So can you devote some brain power to your technology, and maybe we can use this new technology to somehow expand and connect every kid here at the school with someone else who's on the other side of the post-school gap already?
That's it. I mean, I think that's a great idea to use it, because obviously it's a connectivity tool. You're physically you're virtually connecting people who aren't physically.
And we can do it digitally, globally, and we don't have to be here. I live in PB. I drove up this afternoon because I knew nothing about spatial computing, and I saw your resume. I said, she's a rock star. I need to meet her. So this is my big question for you, though. As I left corporate America after 21 years, you've basically done the same thing. Even though you've gone to be CEO of a company, you're taking a huge risk, right? I just got done talking to the Entrepreneur Society the other night, and one of my pieces of advice to all these young people is, very few of you are going to be entrepreneurs and survive out of school from day one, because you have to make adult minimum wage to pay your rent, to live in PB, an apartment with a roommate. How radical a leap was that for you, and do you also believe, as I do, that they should go get some experience in the real world, steal their employers blind legally for relationships, experience, knowledge, everything, because the employer is going to take everything out of you, like the other young lady just mentioned about her burnout, And what's your opinion about the process of working for someone for a while and then making the leap? And how did you do it? And why did you think you could be a CEO?
Yeah, there's benefit to it. I learned a lot about, structure, governance, leadership at both Qualcomm and Microsoft. I mean, I was 25 years at Qualcomm and I learned new things at Microsoft. So I think there's benefit to having big company experience and then applying that to a small company. That's why I felt comfortable doing it at the time that I did. I felt like I had the tools after those years to go off and do this. I think if I had to rewind, I might have done it earlier. I tended to say, I'm not ready just yet. I need a little bit more experience. But, the timing turned out just fine because I got into a field that I love.
Did you see yourself as an entrepreneur as a teenager?
No, not at all. Not at all. And now I think kids do. There's more opportunity. I just went to the Entrepreneur Center over here, which is amazing. And so I do think they see that. But I do like the idea of getting a little bit of both sides because I think they're additive to have both sets of experiences.
Yeah, I saw myself as an entrepreneur at 16, but it just took me 21 years in corporate America to then finally get the guts to do it. But I look forward to talking about it further because I was head of e-business globally for a commercial real estate company going global. So I can see unbelievable applications in the commercial real estate space,
big application,
which is where I'm at. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Just one more last question.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Christopher Holden. I'm a junior business entrepreneurship. I kind of have a small, I guess it's a technical question. How does the virtual, augmented reality affect your eyes? And you're having a screen about a centimeter away maybe from your eye. So how does it affect that? And then when you're trying to advance your technology or innovate, are you going out and talking to your future customers possibly?
Yes.
Or are you in group think tanks and you're just really bouncing ideas? What's the best way to find the innovation, find what those people need, and actually pursuing it rather than just guessing and hoping the customer is really going to enjoy what you are providing?
Yeah, what you're saying, the second part of your question is something that a lot of companies do. They say, I know what the customer wants, I'm going to go build it. Mm-hmm. And unless you've heard that from the customer, you might be completely off track. So it's always good to, it's why we're starting with an early access program with Magic Leap too, because I want to learn about how they're using it and what tweaks I can make to the product to make it better before launching it for general availability next year. So it's very important to get customer feedback because what you think they need might not even be important to them. Yeah. And we learned a few of those things. But on the first thing, we have something called the clipping plane. And as you bring that digital content closer and closer, and by the way, there was no research on this because nobody had ever done augmented reality before. So we were trying to figure this out with our own set of engineers. But we've learned just how close it can get to your eyes before it starts to give you that nauseous feeling if you are one of those people who
Do they have
nauseous.
a built-in blue light kind of blocker? I know there's glasses now that can block out the blue light.
We call it the clipping plane. We just erase the image. It gets close and then it just goes away.
Oh, that's cool.
Because if it comes closer, it just affects too many people. Yeah. And we didn't want to make it a bad experience for them.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I would like to thank the audience for great questions, Ms. Johnson, for your great answers. And a staple at our President's Lecture Series events is to ask our distinguished lecturer a dozen questions that are on the more personal side. Okay. We deliver these questions quickly and rapidly so that we can receive their first-to-mind response. I would like to introduce Dr. Fred Harris, who will have the honor of asking Ms. Johnson these rapid-fire questions. Introduction of Dr. Harris. He is an emeritus professor in electrical engineering. Many of you who are here today know Fred, as he was an SDSU faculty member for over 50 years and led our digital signal processing efforts. He was a mentor, professor, and friend to Eric Johnson, Peggy's husband, when he attended SDSU. Eric is here with us today. Thank you for joining us. Eric and Peggy generously established the Fred Harris Endowed Chair in Digital Signal Processing in honor of their friend. And I'm happy to share that we're currently recruiting for this inaugural Endowed Chair position. Fred, could you please join us on the stage?
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
Fred, I have to say I'm a little afraid.
What was that last?
I'm a little afraid.
Oh, no,
when your
no,
questions
no.
are
I have to ad lib. I have a list of questions I'm supposed to ask. Many years ago, when I first came to California, after graduating from college in 1961, I realized I didn't know anyone. I was in a different state, different city. I knew no one. I decided to join an organization where I could meet people. It was a social attempt to meet other people in Sacramento. So I joined Toastmasters. And Toastmasters would give me a skill that I thought I could use. How do you make a presentation? And the first thing they teach you when you make your first presentation is write notes on a piece of card. And then when you're standing at the podium, you could look down and you could use the notes to remind you what you're doing. So I did that. I stood up in front of the podium, I looked down at my notes, and I realized I had made the words so small I couldn't read them. So there I was thinking, you've got 40 people in the audience waiting for you to say something, and there's nothing you can say that's on that sheet of paper. So I explained to the audience, I said, I just realized something I want to share with you. I just realized I can write in 2 languages. Unfortunately, I can only read one of them. And that means I can't give you this talk, I'll give you an impromptu talk. So that was my experience the first time I gave a presentation from a set of notes. So, Peggy?
Okay.
Okay, I have a set of questions.
Okay.
1, what profession other than yours would you like to attempt?
Oh, I would love to be a fashion designer.
A fashion designer, okay.
I love fashion.
Okay, what is the best piece of advice you ever received?
Be yourself.
Very good. What is your favorite word?
Grace. I love that word, grace.
Very good. What is your least favorite word?
Oh, God. Slobber. Yeah, a bear just broke into our house and slobbered a lot.
Oh, dear. Okay. I had a friend who had a house up in the mountains, and during the winter the bears would come out.
Yeah, that's what just happened to us.
That's what to you. Okay. Okay. Who do you admire?
Oh, my mom.
Very good. Tell me about a book or a podcast you recently enjoyed.
Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary. He did Martian too, but Project Hail Mary was great.
Okay. If you can invite any 3 people to dinner, what would their names be?
Oh, you know what? It would be family. It'd be my dad, who I never really got to know, and my grandparents from Ireland. I'd love to have them over for dinner.
Yes. What is your favorite film?
Sound of Music. Yes.
Sound of Music. Okay. Tell us an interesting or surprising thing about yourself.
I used to parachute, but I don't anymore.
Oh, okay. Probably good advice.
Yes.
What do you consider as your greatest accomplishment?
Oh, my kids.
Your kids. Very nice. I know them. They're nice kids.
Yes, one's right there.
Okay. Tell us about a person who has influenced you the most.
Oh, you know what? It was one of my first bosses, Emily Turner. She was a woman in engineering, and she definitely had an impact on me.
Which company?
GE.
GE. Okay. In 5 words or less, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, wow. Well, I think it's the thing on my Twitter post. 3 kids, 2 dogs, 1 husband. That's my whole world.
Okay. Well, that's my last question. Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think this is it. I want to thank the audience. I want to thank Peggy Johnson for all the time she spent and the wonderful afternoon we've had listening to her responses, and I hope we're all inspired. I mean, her road was a special road. that, of course, started many years ago, but also resulted in tremendous accomplishments. And we're so proud of you being an alum of SDSU. When I heard your story and I imagined how many of our students will listen to this wonderful event, I think they're going to be truly inspired and they're going to see themselves in you in so many ways. So thank you so much, Peggy.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you. Thanks, Deb. Thank you.